My name is Jan Sikes, and I've written a short story called Mountain Laurel. Tell me, Mr. Roberts, what's it like being a big singing star? The afternoon sun reflected off the lone front window as I turned my attention from the shot glass nestled comfortably in my hand to the watery blue eyes of an overweight fellow in a cheap leisure suit. I reckon it's okay. The heavy-set man eased his rear up on the bar stool next to me and motioned to the bartender. I hate to intrude, but I'm trying real hard to get established as a reporter, and I need a story bad. What was it like for you growing up? Shifting away from the obtrusive interviewer, I stared past him at a memory as vivid as if it were yesterday. Wide-eyed, I watched as my mama sank into the nearest threadbare chair and crumpled into a heap of sobs. I could hear the words that fell out of the foreman's mouth as he laid a clumsy hand on Mama's shoulder, but they didn't register in my 12-year-old brain. Mrs. Anderson, I'm sure sorry. We tried everything to get Robert out, but when the back section of the mine collapsed, it was awful bad. The miner sighed and shoved a hand covered with coal dust into his pocket. I'll have the missus come around and check on you if that's okay. Mama didn't answer. The kind of grief a person only feels when everything they love is snatched away racked her body, causing her frail shoulders to heave. Guttural cries sprang from her throat, making the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Thank heavens my older sister had the good sense to see the man to the door. After all, April was the strong one. Barely 15, she had long dark ringlets that hung down her back and violet eyes that Papa often said could turn any man's head. She looked more like Papa than the rest of us. I spared Mama a glance. She was broken. Deep down that day, I knew I no longer had a Mama or a Papa. Mr. Roberts, sir, I really would like to ask some questions if you can spare me 5 minutes. The reporter fished out a pencil and a tablet while he sipped on a foamy draft beer. It wasn't that I minded being interviewed, it was just the memories that his questions stirred. No matter how much I drank, how many women I slept with, or how many shows I sold out, the guilt was always there. Papa was my best friend. I admired everything about him. The easy way he moved through life, always smiling and tipping his hat to the ladies, but most of all the ease that music flowed through him. He could play damn near any instrument. That was the gift he had passed on to me. From my bar stool, I could picture him in his favorite rocker on the front porch, blowing smoke rings from his pipe, plucking on his banjo, and nodding at me when it was my turn to play my old beat-up harmony guitar. I had a little brother, Timmy, 7 years younger. Timmy had been born different. They said his brain never developed the way it should. He'd sit for hours and play with dust that danced on the sunbeams through the windows, lost in his own little world. Oh, how Papa doted on him. After that fateful day in the coal mines of Kentucky, the life we'd known as children of Robert Anderson was over. Mama fell into a deep depression and locked everyone out. If it hadn't been for April, us Anderson kids might have starved to death. My one solace was music. I'd often disappear for hours at a time, taking my guitar with me. A stream ran a few hundred yards from our miner's shack on the side of the Cumberland Mountains. That's where I'd go. I played my guitar and sang to the fish that jumped out of the water, turtles that sunned on a log, and frogs that leapt from stone to stone. The fat man cleared his throat loudly. Mr. Roberts, I don't think you've heard a word I've said. Would you at least answer one question? Oh yeah, I'd forgotten all about the insistent reporter. I turned to look squarely at him. What's your name? Lewis Washington, sir. What inspired you to write your hit song, Cumberland Mines? It was a tribute to my father. I motioned to the bartender and returned to my thoughts. Not long after we lost Papa, the local welfare lady came. I hid under the porch and listened. Mrs. Anderson, we're sorry for the loss of your husband, but it has come to our attention that your young son, Timmy, may need to be placed in an institution where he can get help. I didn't have to see Mama's face to know she gave the lady a blank stare. That's all she'd managed to give any of us for months. The welfare lady droned on and on. By the time she drove her 49 Ford down the dirt road that had brought her to our shack, I knew she'd be back to get Timmy. I crawled out from under the porch and kicked at the dust that settled under my feet. Anger took over and I bounded up the porch steps and into the house. Brushing past April, I went straight to Mama. Nothing I said would make her look at me. She was gone. The worst thing a boy can do is cry in front of his older sister. Once I'd said my piece, I grabbed my guitar and headed for the creek, as I'd done 100 times since Papa died. Oh, how I pounded on the guitar that day. The more I cried, the harder I hit the strings. But by the time I dragged myself back to the house, I'd written my first song about tragedy in a Cumberland mountain coal mine. I heard Andy Roberts ain't your real name. The reporter didn't give up, sorry. I glanced at his flushed face. Nope, what's your real one? The way he held the pencil over the paper reminded me of a bird about to dive for its prey. You're getting awful personal, I growled. For a long moment, I considered punching him in the face. No kid should have to go through life as Norbert Angus. If I lived to be 100 years old, I'd never understand what possessed Mama and Papa. At least Papa had shortened it to Bert, but that wasn't much better in my way of thinking. From the corner of my eye, I spotted a voluptuous brunette who wiggled through the barroom door. For a split second, our eyes met, and she tugged at the fringed sequin top, giving me an unobstructed view of her cleavage. I sighed and looked away. It was all the same. The shows, the reporters, the whiskey, the women, and worst of all, the memories. The memories that haunt me and won't let me be. The day the welfare lady returned to take Timmy was the one time I saw Mama show a spark of who she had once been. She grabbed the lady's dress, screaming at the top of her lungs, fighting for her child. Timmy's wails only added to the chaos. But in the end, the welfare lady won and stuffed Timmy into the back seat of the Ford, spinning rocks and dirt as she took off. We never saw him again. Guilt and shame rolled over me in waves as I gripped the whiskey glass, finally setting it down before I shattered it. Here I am, a big Nashville singing star, and never once have I tried to find Timmy. Not long after that horrible day, April married the first soldier that came along and moved to Toledo, leaving just Mama and me. The memory of Papa placing his hand on my shoulder a few days before he died and making me promise to take care of Mama, April, and Timmy if anything happened to him stuck in the back of my throat now like a bitter quinine pill. I failed him, I failed myself, and I failed Mama. The awkwardness of those days that followed would be forever branded in my mind. The way Mama stared through dull eyes into nothingness, the way I made clumsy attempts to feed us, and the way I longed to escape. Within a few months, Mama took to bed sick. She never got up again. Just before my 14th birthday, I was an orphan, facing the world alone. The reporter's whine jarred me as he dove into a second beer. I understand that you came from Kentucky, Mr. Roberts. How did you get all the way to Nashville? I pushed the memories aside and faced Lewis. I walked. Walked? He scribbled furiously. Got a hearing problem, Lewis? After my mama died, I went to Toledo to live with my older sister and her husband. I was almost 15 when I struck out for Nashville. All I had were the clothes on my back and a beat-up harmony guitar. That's a hard walk. He took a long draw from his mug. You have no idea. The brunette managed to bump into me as she brushed past on her way to the ladies' room. Oh, I'm so sorry, she tittered. I silently tipped my black Stetson and turned away. Pardon my French, Mr. Roberts, but what in the hell does a 15-year-old kid do in Nashville? A smile crossed my face as I remembered the lady who took me in off the streets. She was a beauty with flaming red hair and 14 years my senior, but she could sing. She was already a star, performing on the Grand Ole Opry and recording on Columbia Records. She would tell me I was the prettiest thing she'd ever seen, and I'd blush. I raised my head and stared long and hard at my reflection in the mirror behind the bar. I never thought of a man as being pretty. My eyes weren't violet like April's, they were more of a blue-gray, and I had a head of dark, wavy hair. I was tall and slender, and she loved dressing me in expensive rhinestone suits. She was as fine a lady as had ever been born. She took me with her everywhere she went and introduced me to all of the Nashville players. And at night when the curtains fell and we were alone, she took me to her bed. She made me a man, a real man. She taught me how to please, exactly how to touch all the right places and what made a woman lose control. By the time I turned 17, I opened shows for her and warmed her bed when her husband was away. Karina South was on top of the world. She drank heavy, fought hard, loved harder, and sang with all her heart and soul. Then a car wreck took her from me and from the world. There would never be another Karina South, and I'd never give quite as much of myself to another woman. Despite the thoughts that flooded my mind, I managed a civil reply to the insistent man. I was lucky. Karina South needed an opening act, and I auditioned. After a long moment, I stood, threw some bills on the bar, and headed for the door. Lewis shouted after me, "But I'm not done yet, Mr. Roberts. We're just getting started." I waved at him over my shoulder and dug the keys to the Jaguar out of my pocket. Without a second thought or backward glance, I turned the car onto the highway and gunned it. I didn't let off the gas until the speedometer hit 100. When it slowed to 90, I hit the cruise control. It didn't matter that I had a show to do 24 hours from now, or that a pretty blonde waited for me in my uptown Nashville apartment. I located a half-empty bottle of whiskey under the front seat. A quick twist of the lid, and the amber liquid burned its way down my throat. The sun was starting to slip behind the mountain when I turned down the rutted lane that led to the familiar miner shack. My Jag hit bottom as the tires slid into deep ruts. I maneuvered it the best I could and rolled to a stop in front of what was left of our cabin. The porch and most of the walls still stood, and the mountain laurel tree Papa had planted for Mama at the corner of the porch gave off a sweet, tantalizing fragrance. It seemed to be the only thing left alive. Inside, I found decaying ruins inhabited by varmints. I took in the familiar rough-hewn board walls and kicked at a tin can that rolled across the dirt-covered floor. A mouse streaked across the floor and into a hole. I sank down on my haunches and put my head in my hands. Somehow I had to find a way to get past the guilt that gnawed at my insides like a rabid animal. Papa would be sorely disappointed. I'd been handed an opportunity that few people ever get in a lifetime, and yet I was dead inside. Papa's flashing eyes and wide smile were in front of me. I could almost feel his breath on my face and hear him say, "Son, get my banjo, let's pick a little." After some time, I got to my feet and poked around the house in the fading sunlight. A yellowed envelope tucked carefully away in Mama's top dresser drawer caught my attention. The address showed Blackman Children's Home in Bowling Green, Kentucky. I carefully slipped the letter out of the envelope and my heart jolted. I never knew where they had taken Timmy until now. I folded the letter and slid it into my pocket. In the back corner of the kitchen pantry, I found Papa's banjo covered with a thick layer of dust. I picked it up and wiped it off with the tail of my expensive silk shirt. It wasn't until minutes later I realized tears coursed down my cheeks. I tuned the rusty strings, picked out Papa's favorite song, and talked to him. I felt like a real person for the first time in many years. A man needs roots, no matter if they're only in his mind. "I'm sorry, Papa, I let you down. I let Mama die, and I let the welfare lady take Timmy." The words poured out of me like water from a spigot. The louder I played, the louder my voice got until I was fairly shouting. The room began to spin, my knees buckled, and I went down with a thud. When I opened my eyes, the room was pitch black. Where was I? I groaned and rolled over. I was going to be sick. I stumbled out onto the porch and let the whiskey spew from me. When had I eaten last? With knees like jello and only pale moonlight to guide me, I made my way down the rickety porch steps to the Jag. With any luck, I'd find a package of crackers in the glove box. I returned to sit on the porch with a half bottle of water and 2 crackers in hand. I knew I had to rid myself of this demon. I needed a sign, something to tell me Papa forgave me. I reached inside my pocket and felt the letter. It was too late for Mama, but maybe not too late to do something for Timmy. I lost track of time as I sat cloaked in the darkness. A flash from the sky got my attention. A shooting star streaked across above me, followed by another and another. I felt a familiar hand squeeze my shoulder. Was it really Papa's voice, or did I imagine it? Then I heard his easy rolling laughter when he told me to get my ass back in that fancy car and go make some music. I stood, brushed the dirt off my clothes, retrieved Papa's banjo, threw it in the back seat, and turned the car around just as the sun peeked over the horizon. I pulled into a truck stop not far down the road. With a steaming cup of coffee in hand, I fished the yellow paper out of my pocket, located a payphone, and dialed the number on the letter. "It's a great morning here at Blackman Children's Home," a cheerful voice greeted me. After a finished explaining who I was, I heard excitement on the other end of the line. "I can't tell you how thrilled I am that you called. We thought Timmy's family was dead. He was just about to turn 18. You know, he had an obsessive fascination with the banjo when he first came to stay with us, so we taught him to play. You should hear him. He's nothing short of genius." I choked back tears and promised to be there within 2 hours. I told the kind lady I would be taking my brother home with me as soon as the paperwork could be processed. Just before I turned onto the highway, I rolled the window down, hung my head out, and shouted, "I love you, Papa. Keep watching, because I'm going to get this right." I thought about the fragrant blooming tree in the front of the cabin and how Mama's eyes shone the day Papa planted it. I began to write. "She is like a mountain laurel, a breath of pure fresh air. Her hair the scent of floral, her eyes so bright and fair."